There are places meant to shape our minds, halls where we learn, grow, and prepare for the future. But what if some of those places hold memories far darker than exams and lectures? What if, hidden beneath the chalk dust and class bells, are stories that were never meant to be remembered? Tonight, we take you through 6 chilling tales that prove school might be the last place you'd expect to find the supernatural, but perhaps the most haunted of all. Welcome to Real Weird Things. In 2016, Eleanor Briggs was the head custodian at the century-old Middleton High School in Vermont. She knew every hallway, every hidden maintenance door, and every creaky floorboard. But on a chilly October morning, she noticed something that stopped her in her tracks. A locker. Number 329. A locker that hadn't been there the day before. Middleton High had an exact count of 328 lockers. She would know. She had replaced nearly half of them over the years. But there it was, old-fashioned, painted a dull red that didn't match the rest, wedged between lockers 118 and 119 like it had always been there. She thought it was a prank, maybe some elaborate senior project. But the lock was rusted shut. The paint chipped and faded like it had been aging for decades. Stranger still, no student had reported it, and no one seemed to notice anything odd. That night, Eleanor stayed late to investigate. She brought bolt cutters, planning to open it and prove it was just some weird abandoned storage. But when she clipped the lock and pulled the door open, a blast of cold air hit her face. Inside was nothing but darkness, deeper than it should have been. She shined her flashlight in and realized it wasn't a locker at all. It was a tunnel. A narrow, spiraling staircase descended into the darkness beyond. Against her better judgment, she stepped inside. The air grew colder with each step. The brick walls were damp, and there were strange chalk symbols etched along them. She descended what felt like 10 stories before she heard it. A faint scraping sound, like nails dragging across stone. She stopped, listened. The sound came closer, faster. Panicked, she turned and raced back up the stairs. But no matter how many steps she climbed, the top never came. Her flashlight flickered, then died. In the pitch-black silence, she could hear breathing right behind her. She screamed and slammed her hands against the wall, trying to find any break, any opening. And then light. She was suddenly back in the hallway, on the floor, the locker door wide open. Her flashlight lay beside her, intact. She was covered in dust and cobwebs, her uniform torn. The next morning, locker 329 was gone. She told the principal. He laughed it off, said there had never been a locker there. When she demanded security footage, the cameras in that hallway had all glitched the night before. But she wasn't the only one who had seen something. Over the following weeks, students began whispering about strange noises. Low groaning sounds coming from the walls, sudden cold spots, and the feeling of being watched between classes. A freshman claimed she saw someone standing inside a locker before it slammed shut on its own. Eleanor retired early that year, but she never stopped looking into the school's history. She discovered that, during a renovation in 1934, a student named Thomas Gray had disappeared. The blueprints showed a hidden subbasement once accessible through locker 118. It had been sealed after his disappearance. Now, every October, the rumors start again. Students speak of a locker that appears for just one night. Its number faded, its door slightly ajar. And if you listen closely, you might hear the sound of footsteps on stairs that lead to nowhere. In 1998, Carlos Jensen, a substitute teacher fresh out of college, was assigned to Valley Ridge High School in a small Oregon town. On his 3rd week, he was tasked with overseeing detention one Friday afternoon. The list had only one student, Hannah Wells, a quiet girl with jet-black hair who rarely spoke in class. Carlos found her already sitting in the room when he arrived. Even though the door had been locked and he had the only key, she sat at the far end, head down, scribbling something into a notebook. He signed in, sat at the front desk, and tried to break the silence. "Hannah, right? You know why you're here." She didn't respond, just kept writing. The air in the room felt unusually cold. The clock on the wall had stopped ticking, frozen at 3:17 p.m. He checked his watch, 3:17 p.m. exactly. "Weird," he muttered. He walked over to the window to check if something was off with the power lines. When he turned back, Hannah was gone. Her chair was empty. Her notebook lay open on the desk, filled with frantic, looping words over and over. "Don't let her out. Don't let her out. Don't let her out." Then the door slammed shut. Carlos rushed to it. It was locked. He banged on the glass, called for help, but the hallway was completely dark. His voice echoed as if the building were empty. He tried using his phone, but there was no signal, no light. Then he heard it, footsteps, slow, dragging, approaching from just outside the door. A girl's humming floated through the air, soft and tuneless. "Hannah?" he called out. The door creaked open on its own. But it wasn't Hannah. Standing there was something wearing her clothes, but taller, older, its eyes sunken and black. Its mouth opened impossibly wide, and it let out a long, low moan that rattled the windows. Carlos stumbled back, crashing into a desk. The thing stepped inside, leaving behind wet footprints as it moved. Carlos reached for the fire extinguisher on the wall and swung it. But he was suddenly outside, in the parking lot, lying on the pavement as if he had been thrown from the building. It was 3:18 p.m. He never went back. He tried to report the incident, but the school denied any record of a Hannah Wells. There had been no detention scheduled that day. The room had been locked for years due to asbestos. But Carlos still has the notebook. Every page still reads, "Don't let her out." Only now, sometimes the message changes. Sometimes it says, "She's already out." In 2002, at Westwood High School in Michigan, the old chemistry lab had been closed off for years. The official story was a gas leak incident, but students whispered about something much darker. They said the room was haunted by a girl named Rebecca Fields, a senior who vanished during a chemistry experiment in 1981. According to legend, Rebecca was working on an independent study project late one afternoon, unsupervised against school policy. No one knows what she was mixing, but teachers heard an ear-splitting bang, followed by smoke pouring from under the lab door. When they rushed in, the room was in disarray. Broken glass, scorched counters, but Rebecca was gone. Not a trace of her remained. No blood, no body, no sign she'd ever left the room. Her disappearance left the entire school in shock. Some believed it was a tragic accident. Others whispered of a failed attempt at some occult chemical formula. A few even said they heard her scream long after the explosion ended. The school tried to suppress the rumors, but the students had already turned her into a ghost story. The room was sealed shortly after, but strange things kept happening. Books bursting into flames in science classrooms, faucets turning on by themselves, lights short-circuiting during exams, and a persistent smell of sulfur on the third floor. Some students claimed they saw a girl with singed clothes reflected in the lab windows, when no one was inside. 20 years later, a substitute chemistry teacher named Mr. Lyle decided to explore the room. He claimed he didn't believe in ghosts and wanted to prove to his students that it was all nonsense. He got the old key from the janitor, who warned him not to stay inside too long. The janitor, an old man named Curtis, said he had once heard whispering from inside the sealed room when passing by late at night. "She doesn't like to be disturbed," he told Mr. Lyle. That evening, Mr. Lyle unlocked the door. The air inside was stale, thick with dust. Everything had been left exactly as it was in 1981. Beakers, textbooks, even Rebecca's notebook still open on the counter. He began documenting the room with his phone, narrating sarcastically for a video he planned to show his class. But then the lights flickered. A soft hissing sound filled the room. One of the beakers began to bubble, even though it was empty. The blackboard, coated in decades of grime, suddenly displayed fresh writing. "I'm still here." The door slammed shut. He turned to open it, but the knob was scorching hot. He screamed, pounding on the door. His phone stopped recording. The bubbling intensified, and a thick green mist began to fill the room. Through the fog, he saw her. A girl in a scorched lab coat, her hair floating as if underwater, her eyes glowing faintly. She raised a hand toward him, mouthing words he couldn't understand. Papers began to fly off the desks, glass cracked without reason, and every metal object in the room started to vibrate. Mr. Lyle's screams were muffled by the strange pressure in the air. He backed into a corner as the mist surrounded him entirely. When the janitor opened the door the next morning, the room was spotless. Mr. Lyle was gone. All that remained was a single handprint burned into the counter, and Rebecca's notebook, now closed. Curtis never spoke of what he found that morning. He simply resealed the lab and locked it away again. But since then, students report the chemistry lab door creaking open on its own during storms, and the unmistakable scent of burning chemicals drifting through the hall. And every now and then, a new name appears in the back of Rebecca's notebook. The last one written, Lyle. Some believe Rebecca isn't just haunting the lab. She's trying to finish whatever experiment she started. And every few years, she finds a new assistant. At Fairhaven Middle School in Oregon, there was a peculiar architectural anomaly. On the second floor, classrooms were labeled 3A, 3C, and 3D. But room 3B, no one could find it. Teachers said it had been converted into a storage space years ago. But some students whispered otherwise. Ellie Tran, a curious 8th grader with a love for mysteries, made it her mission to discover the truth about room 3B. She spent weeks investigating, pulling old-school blueprints from the local library, interviewing retired staff, and even sneaking around after school. Every source pointed to the same thing. Room 3B had once existed. But something happened in the early 90s. Something that made the school try to erase it completely. According to a custodian who had worked at Fairhaven for over 30 years, Room 3B was sealed after a student named Aaron Whitaker disappeared during detention. The story went like this. Aaron had been left alone in Room 3B one Friday afternoon. When the teacher returned 10 minutes later, the room was empty. Not just Aaron. Everything was gone. Desks, chairs, even the whiteboard. Just bare walls and dust. The teacher ran screaming from the room. When staff returned minutes later, the door wouldn't open. It no longer even had a handle. The school quietly renumbered the rooms, sealed the area behind drywall, and warned the staff not to speak of it again. But sometimes, just sometimes, students claimed to hear knocks behind the wall where 3B should have been. Faint scratching sounds or whispers calling their names. Ellie didn't care about the warnings. One night, during a thunderstorm, she stayed after school, hiding in the janitor's closet with her flashlight and phone. She found the section of the hallway where 3B should have been. She pressed her ear to the wall. Nothing. Then she tapped. One knock, then 2 knocks came back. The drywall began to ripple. Slowly, a faint outline of a door emerged. On it, 3B in faded bronze numbers. Her phone glitched, screen flickering. She grabbed the handle. It was ice cold, and turned. The door opened with a hiss. Inside, the room was perfectly preserved, as if frozen in time. Desks neatly aligned, a chalkboard with Aaron Whitaker's name still scrawled across it, and in the far corner a boy, sitting motionless, his eyes wide and hollow. Ellie stepped back. The boy turned slowly, cracked a faint smile, and whispered, "Now you found it." The door slammed shut. The next morning, the janitor found the hallway perfectly normal again. No sign of a door, no sign of Ellie, but a new rumor began to spread among the students. If you knock twice where room 3B once stood, someone might just knock back. And once you open that door, you can't leave. St. Augustine Academy was one of the oldest schools in New England, a towering stone building that had once been a monastery. It still kept many of its old traditions, including the massive bell tower that loomed over the campus. But there was one rule every student knew: never be outside when the bell rings at midnight. It sounded ridiculous. The bell hadn't worked for decades. Struck by lightning in the 70s, it cracked and was left to rust. Yet the rule remained. No one could explain it. The staff avoided the topic. But the seniors told stories. Terrible ones. They said the bell rings on its own. Not every night, just when it wants to. Always at midnight. And if you're outside when it tolls, just once, you'll hear footsteps behind you. No matter how fast you run, they keep pace. If you look back, they say, you vanish. It was tradition for rebellious students to dare each other to break curfew and wait in the courtyard. Most came back, shaken but fine, except for one. In 1998, a student named Marcus Geller didn't return. His dorm bed was untouched. All they found was his watch, stopped at 12 o'clock sharp, lying at the foot of the bell tower. The incident was hushed. Officially, Marcus ran away. Unofficially, the midnight bell became taboo. Years later, Clara Ruiz, a new transfer and skeptic of ghost stories, decided to prove it was all superstition. She brought her camera and stood in the courtyard, alone under the full moon. Midnight crept closer. She waited. Then it rang, loud, clear, echoing across the stone walls. Her camera flickered. First, nothing, just silence. Then soft, dragging footsteps on the cobblestones behind her. Slow, relentless. She turned, fast. No one. She ran. The bell rang again. A shadow flitted across the archway ahead. The doors to the main building wouldn't budge. Her flashlight sputtered. In the reflection of a hallway window, she saw something following. A long, hooded figure, gliding silently, its face hidden. When staff opened the doors in the morning, Clara was gone. But her camera lay at the base of the tower, still recording. The footage ends just after the second bell tolls, with Clara's voice whispering, "It's not behind me anymore. It's above." Since then, the midnight bell has rung 3 more times. And each time, someone new has disappeared. They say it tolls not to warn you, but to call you. At Maple Grove Middle School, Ms. Danner's 8th grade class was known to be difficult, loud, disrespectful, always pushing teachers to the edge. So, when she suddenly took a leave of absence in the middle of October, no one was surprised. What did surprise everyone was the substitute who arrived the next morning. She introduced herself simply as Ms. Vale. Tall, pale, dressed in an old-fashioned black dress with silver clasps, and eyes so dark they almost looked solid. No one had seen her enter the building. No one knew who had hired her. From the start, the class was silent. Not by instruction, by instinct. There was something in the way she looked at them, the way her voice echoed. Even though she barely spoke above a whisper, she never smiled. She never blinked. She never turned her back. Students said time moved strangely in her class. The clock seemed stuck at 11:11. The windows showed only gray fog, even on sunny days. And when one boy tried to sneak out, he returned the next day changed. Quiet, pale, eyes wide and unblinking. He wouldn't speak about what happened. Then came the lessons. She didn't teach from any textbook. Instead, she asked questions, strange ones. What do you remember before this life? Would you trade your voice for knowledge? What would you give up to never feel fear again? Each question was followed by silence. And then answers. The students found themselves speaking, even when they didn't want to, telling secrets they didn't know they had. By Friday, 3 students had transferred out. One stopped talking entirely. Another began writing the same symbol over and over in her notebook. A spiral made of thorns. On Monday, Ms. Danner returned. No one had called her. No one had told her the school had even found a substitute. But when she entered her classroom, it was cold. Every student sat perfectly still. The room smelled faintly of burnt flowers. And on the board, written in looping, elegant script, was a single message. They're ready. No one ever saw Ms. Vale again. Her name wasn't in any district record. The front office had no sign-in sheet. The school camera for that hallway had been coincidentally offline all week. But if you ask any of those students today, now adults, what they remember most, they'll all say the same thing. She knew me too well, like she'd taught me before, a long, long time ago. And in quiet moments, some of them swear they still hear her voice, whispering their names. You came looking for knowledge and found something far more terrifying. From haunted classrooms to substitutes who might not be human, these stories remind us that even in the most ordinary places, the extraordinary and the horrifying can be hiding just out of sight. Which story stuck with you the most? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want more real weird things. Class is dismissed. Until next time.